Yeah, my son Dylan at the time was, I think he was 12, and he's like, and of course we're up in Milwaukee, which is only about an hour and a half away from where that was being held, and he's like, Dad, can't you pull some of your Fender connections and get us into that show? I'm like, oh, let me see what I can do. So I called, and sure enough, we went down there and weaseled in, and it was glorious. This is a non sequitur, but it's a funny story. So a buddy of mine from town here, Hubert Sumlin lived in Milwaukee for his last,
Yep. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Howlin' Wolf's nephew, right?
I believe so. And so he lived up here, and I got to know him a bit. We did, a couple of gigs here and there, but there was a great guitar player from town here who was really tight with Hubert, and kind of him and his family kind of watched over him and stuff. And so at that event, he was looking after Hubert. So he was kind of like roading for Hubert, made sure his guitar was all set. And so we're watching the show, and we're off kind of up in the hinterland, looking kind of down to the side of the stage. And I see on the side of the stage, it's my buddy Jeff Dagenhart from town here, who's looking after Hubert. He's sitting right next to Eric Clapton and Bill Murray. And I'm looking, I'm like, there's 20,000 people here. I look up on stage, Jeff Dagenhart from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, sitting next to Eric Clapton and Bill Murray. So at the end of the show, I see Jeff. I go, Jeff, I'm watching the show, and you're sitting next to Clapton. I mean, did you talk to him? I mean, what did anything? He's like, well, it was kind of weird. We're hanging out the whole time. I mean, every time I'm sitting there with Hubert, Clapton would come over and kind of sit down. So, I felt comfortable enough that at some point where I'm sitting next to him on the side of the stage, I looked over and I said, hey, Eric, do you mind if I grab a quick picture of you and I sitting here? And Eric goes, I got to go get a hot dog. And he gets up and he goes to the back of the stage. There's like a little hot dog stand at the back of the stage, and he makes himself a little hot dog and disappears. So I thought, there you go. Anytime you're in a situation where you don't want to get a picture taken, you just say, I want to go get a hot dog, and magically a stand will manifest.
Yeah. Oh, well.
But what are you going to do?
But he didn't get the picture.
He didn't get the picture, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
No,
these things happen. But every time I think of that Crossroads Festival, Crossroads Festival, one of the things I think about is, I got to go get a hot dog. Just one of those stories.
Yeah, you're making me hungry. I remember meeting a few. I remember that gig. Johnny Winters was on that gig.
Yes.
And of course he sat down because he was pretty frail, I think, at that time. I didn't get to meet him, but a friend of mine was playing drums in his band at that time. Uh-huh. And he was there, but he didn't get to play because I think Johnny Winter just sat in with Derek Trucks. As far as I remember. Derek
Trucks came out. I think they did Dust My Broom or something like that. And then they actually recorded it.
Yeah. But I also met, I'll tell you who I did meet there, who's been a big fan, I've been a big fan of for a long time, although there's a slight crossover because I've got a Dobro, but I met Jerry Douglas there.
Oh, yeah.
The most charming, lovely, we had quite a few mutual friends in Nashville, people that he'd worked with, like Alison Brown and his name's gone. I'll think of his name in a minute. So, but I got a chat with him, which is great because he'd just gone back to using Beard Dobros after having some kind of weird thing with Gibson that didn't work out. But I got my Dobro here, the one I did. Have you ever seen me play with John Mayer at the song called Daughters? Yeah.
And,
yeah, I did that. There's something that got a lot of hits on YouTube, but I've got this, which is a spider bridge, proper spider bridge. It's not a dobro. It's made by a guy in France who's got a company called Fine Resophonic, and and it's a beautiful thing. I have to say, because I've got have you got any resonator guitars? I mean, the
I've had various. I actually got one of the new Nationals last summer. After I've had a Dobro and I got rid of it, and then I just had this cheap little Gretsch that sounded great, and I used that on a bunch of records. And then I was traveling someplace and I played one of the new Nationals. It was a Duolian and it was blue, and so between sounding great and being blue, I had to have it. So
yeah, I like some of that. I'd like to get an old. I used to have an old Duolian. Yeah. Because I really noticed the difference between something like this, which has got the spider bridge.
Right.
So the resonator is like a speaker, the deep part's in the middle.
Right.
And as you know, with spider bridges, the sound is spread from, you can see these things inside here, is spread across to the outside of the cone. So you get a much more...
Beautiful.
But then I've got this... the same guy made me this, which is this is the more common biscuit bridge. So the resonator's around the other way, you know what I mean? Bloody hell. It's so different, you know, when you get into these things. I mean, I'd love an old Dobro with a spider bridge. The spider bridges are kind of they're kind of harder to find a good one. But
sounds glorious, though.
I mean, basically all the country Dobros, you know, with the square necks.
Right.
People like Jerry Douglas, they all have a spider bridge, whereas you know, Sun House and Bucker White,
right,
fans would have, you know, something with the biscuit bridge. So but they're very different. It's amazing how people don't know about that difference. You know,
sure, that nuanced difference between them.
Yeah, it's they're very different, very very different sound. You know, much more sustain out of a spider bridge than out of a biscuit, but it had a totally different sound as well. So I've gone completely off track again. So
that's all right. No, this is all gold. I dig it all. Well, I was going to ask you about, you know, growing up in the UK. First of all, where you're down south now by the ocean or by the sea? Yeah,
I grew up in South London.
Okay.
And got married in South London around about age 24, something like that.
Okay.
And then within a year, we moved down to the south coast. We're kind of, if you go southwest from London.
Okay.
About 120 miles, you come to a place which, if you guess, you're about halfway along the south coast of the UK.
Okay.
We're just outside a place called Weymouth.
Okay.
Which is the only big town that you may have heard of near us is Bournemouth, which is about 20, 25 miles east of us.
Okay.
So we're in Dorset, which is a very rural county. We've been down here for 35 years now. We moved down. So all the kids, the two daughters were actually born in, you know, when we lived up in London, but they were pretty young when we moved down here. So, and when we moved down here, I was playing with the Pretenders. So I only really had to be either in the studio or rehearsing or on tour. So it didn't really matter that I didn't live in London, you know. So we made the move.
Yep.
And,
so in growing up, so you're from Surrey, right? In the Surrey area, so that's where like all the
I mean, it's the north part of Surrey. I mean, where I went to school in Greater London, what they call Greater London, even though postally it's in Surrey. I guess it's like, you know, if you went to school in Manhattan and you lived in Queens or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know.
So what kind of stuff were you listening to when you were, I mean, you started playing guitar when you were like 10 or something like that, wasn't it? Somewhere in that neck of the wood?
Pretty young, yeah. I'm one of the Beatles, and then various finger-picking stuff that my sisters were into, like Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen. And then, you know, I taught myself to play for a fair bit. And then when I was about 13 years old, my mum thought, well, you should have lessons. So she sent me to a classical guitar teacher.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, that has, I mean, it certainly benefited my playing in a certain way with, you know, my left hand and my finger-picking hand and stuff. But then, you know, it's very regimented. So I wish I'd listened to a little bit more jazz maybe when I was growing up. I don't have a great knowledge, or I mean, as much as I love listening to jazz, you know, it's just still sometimes can be a bit of a mystery. So that's why I was saying earlier, I'm more of a kind of parts guy. I can stretch out on blues and I can bluff my way through the odd jazz change, but I'm not really and somebody I'd love, you know, one player that I'd love to be more than anybody is John Scofield.
Oh yeah.
Just not because of his knowledge, which is vast, but just his attitude. You know, he's got like a rock attitude, but with all that jazz stuff behind him, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm a big Scofield fan, so yes.
I absolutely adore his playing, you know, and as much as I love Pat Metheny and, you know, George Benson, George Benson's kind of a link to me to back to the past, you know, he's probably one of the only living players you could kind of link back to Wes Montgomery or someone like that.
Right.
Or with Joe Pass but Scofield's just got, you know, I mean, he just blows me away. I don't know him. I've never met him and I've never seen him live, but I just listened to his stuff in the car. John Scofield all the time, pretty much.
It's interesting. My first Scofield records I had were again in the 80s, the Blue Matter and Loud Jazz. Loud
Jazz I've got, yeah.
I just loved them. And then then there was that there was a live record from that same period of time that I had. And then of course all the stuff later on. I mean, it's
Uber Jam.
Yeah, exactly. Uber Jam's another going. Yeah.
Uber Jam and Up All Night are the two that I have them in the car all the time. I love that band, you know, with Avi Borthnick, you know, Adam Dietz, is it the drummer?
I think so. I actually saw that tour. They played at a club in town here, and
great ideas, awesome. Rhythmic ideas, and you know, like some of the stuff, the sampled stuff that they bring in, and I absolutely love it. I'm a big fan of Scofield, but I mean, he wasn't an early influence, so you know, the Beatles were an early influence.
Right.
And then I kind of got hooked into the mid-teens. My sister had an old Lightning Hopkins record,
right,
which I fell in love with, you know. And then as I met guys that I worked with later on, I got more into electric blues. So Freddie King was a big influence early on. B.B. King, Albert King, Otis Rush.
Yeah.
You know, all that stuff, and then,
all my faves.
Well, then I got into listening to Larry Carlton through the Crusaders,
right?
Joni Mitchell and Steely Dan.
Yeah.
You know, I loved all those records, and it just so happened that Larry Carlton played on all of them.
Right,
played with all of them. mainly obviously the Crusaders. I think I learned every guitar part on Chain Reaction, and every guitar part on those Southern Nights.
Yeah.
And then that kind of branches out into I love Robin Ford.
Sure.
I've seen Robin play a couple of times, and I kind of know him. He's still one of my favourites.
Yep.
And then I had a big, because I'm one of my older sister. I really got into Little Feat quite early on, the early 70s. Sailing Shoes.
Yeah.
Dixie Chicken, last record album, and from that I kind of got into Rykuda, which is I don't know whether that would be, you'd think that was the right way around, but I really got big into Rykuda. From probably just pre Bop Till You Drop, because I still think, as much as I love Bop Till You Drop, I think I'd still prefer some of the other albums. Paradise and Lunch, Into the Purple Valley. The first album of his. So the first kind of early 70s. Probably he was already dead. By then, but I got into Hendrix in a big way. I'm sure you know. The first thing I listened to on a pair of headphones was the first record I listened to on a pair of headphones, because a friend of my sister's had a pair of headphones. I'd never put a pair of headphones. Was Electric Ladyland.
Yes.
And it's like,
right.
What's going on? So a lot of influences. And I remember the first, going back even further, before probably around about the same time I listened to the Beatles records, a friend of my dad had Chet Atkins records that I love. Right. So I kind of got, not that I'm a Chet Atkins aficionado, I can play I can do a bit of a, and actually, Chet Atkins, funnily enough, as it turns out, his style was quite classical. Do you not agree? Think so?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very precise. Very different to somebody like Jerry Reed, who was more of a kind of,
and not quite as bawdy as Merle Travis. Merle Travis had more of that. It's a little greasier. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so did. Did you see that thing I shared on the other day of Jerry Reed and B.B. King?
Yeah, I've seen that. That's great.
Yeah. Well, the way he starts that off, I mean, that's about as greasy as you can get. I mean, it's fantastic. No, I agree. I mean, Chet Atkins is very precise. Everything's key. Every single note is beautifully played, but his style was very, very precise. So like a classical guitar player, I think.
Well, I like that quote of Chet's where he's like, if I skip a day of practicing, I can notice it. If I skip 2 days of practicing, my friends notice it. And if I skip 3 days, everyone can, because those songs are so precise. I mean, they need to be ceaselessly calibrated. I know a few of those Chet things and various different renditions of this, that, and the next thing. And people ask, well, what do you practice? Well, if I want to keep those things anywhere near a performance level, you got to go through them, because it's, as you well know, it's it is definitely a precise operation.